ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Namaste, my dear friends. This is second video on Ashtavakra Gita. In the first video, Ashtavakra Gita was introduced and what are all the topics covered in Ashtavakra Gita were discussed in the first video. Now in this video we start the chapter 1, Introduction on Self-Realization, verse number 1. Janak Vach Katham Jnanam Vapnoti Katham Mukti Bhavishyati Vairagyam Cha Katham Praptam Etad Bruhi Mam Prabho. Janak asked, how can knowledge be acquired? How can liberation be attained? How is renunciation possible? Tell me this, O Lord. These questions were put by King Janaka to sage Ashtavakra. Knowledge means a realization of the identity of the individual self and Paramatman or Brahman, which is existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Sat Chit Anand. Liberation, freedom from ignorance, all bondages and limitations, the effect of knowledge mentioned above, that is, the complete destruction of all misery and attainment of supreme bliss. Renunciation, non-attachment to the enjoyment of the objects of this world as well as of the world beyond. This forms the most important of the four qualifications required of an aspirant from the knowledge of Brahma. The other three qualifications being 1. Discrimination between the real and the unreal. 2. Acquisition of the 6 cardinal moral values, that is, regulation of mind, regulation of the sense organs, etc. And 3rd, intense longing for liberation. Ashtavakra Vach Mukti Michhyasi Chetat Vishayan Vishav Tajya Aksma Arj Vadyat Tosh Satyam Piyush Vadbhaj. Ashtavakra replied, if you aspire after liberation, my child, shun the objects of the senses as poison and seek forgiveness, sincerity, kindness, contentment, and truth as nectar. Objects, etc. Attachment to worldly objects is a great bar to spiritual progress, and hence they should be shunned as bitter poison. The implication is that we should drive away all such ideas as this is mine, that is mine, which spring from the identification of self with body, mind, etc. The giving up of external objects implies also the necessity of controlling the sense organs. Sincerity to be one in mind and speech, as Sri Ramakrishna used to put it. He spoke very highly of this virtue as an essential of spiritual discipline. Truth. This virtue also was greatly emphasized by Sri Ramakrishna and was looked upon by him as a precious possession of a spiritual aspirant. It should be noted here that the cultivation of these virtues implies the control and purification of the internal sense mind so that it may reflect more and more of divine light. This verse mentions the negative and positive practices of a spiritual aspirant. Giving up attachment for worldly things is the negative practice, and cultivation of the moral values, moral virtues is the positive. Verse number 3. न पृथ्वी न जलम न अग्निर्न वायुर्दोर्न वा भवान एषाम साक्षिणम आत्मानं चिद्रूपम विद्धि मुक्तये. You are neither earth nor water, not fire, nor air, nor ether. In order to attain liberation, know the self as the witness of all these and consciousness itself. Earth, etc. These are the five elements constituting our body and mind with which we identify ourselves and become miserable. But our self, which is the witness and eternally distinct from body and mind, which are its objects, is consciousness itself. Our liberation lies in knowing the self as such. Verse number 4. यदि देहं पृथक् कृत्य चिति विश्राम्य तिष्ठसि अधुनैव सुखी शांतो बंध मुक्तो भविष्यसि. If you detach yourself from the body and rest in intelligence, you will at once be happy, peaceful, and free from bondage. Detach, etc. Herein lies the essence of Advaita sadhana. By identifying the self with the body, which is not self, and thus ascribing to self the limitations of the body, such as birth, death, old age, disease, etc., we suffer all kinds of misery. The self is really not the body, so if we can but get rid of this identification, we shall at once be conscious that we are Chit and thus become happy and free from bondage. At once, that is the very moment the self is known as distinct from body, because the self is never really affected by body and mind. They merely hide its glory, even as clouds hide the sun. Verse number 5. Ne tvam विप्रादिको वर्णो न आश्रमी न अक्ष गोचर असंगो असि निराकरो विश्व साक्षी सुखी भव. You do not belong to the Brahmana or any other caste or to any asrama. You are not perceived by the eyes, unattached, formless, and witness of all are you. Be happy. Asrama, the four well-known stages of a Hindu's life prescribed by the scriptures: Brahmacharya, student life; Grihastha, householder's life; Vanprastha, forest life; and Sannyasa, life of renunciation, perceived, etc. That is never an object of sense knowledge. Neither caste, asrama, or any such thing can be predicated of the self. The self, therefore, has no obligation to perform duties pertaining to them. One must realize oneself as above such obligations, as unattached, formless, etc. Happy, that is, by realizing yourself as formless, etc. Verse 6. Dharma adharma sukham dukham मानसानि ने ते विभो न कर्तासि न भोक्तासि मुक्तेवसि सर्वदा. Virtue and vice, pleasure and pain are of the mind, not of you. O all-pervading one, you are neither doer nor enjoyer. Verily, you are ever free. Virtue and vice, these spring respectively from our right and wrong actions, both moral and ceremonial, which are possible only when we think ourselves as doers. Pleasure and pain, effects of virtue and vice on the mind. Virtue and vice, pleasure and pain are all mental. We identify ourselves with the mind, and hence these are also wrongly ascribed to the self. 7. Verse number 7. एको दृष्टासि सर्वस्य मुक्त परायो असि सर्वदा अयमेव हि ते बंधो दृष्टारं पश्य सीतरम. You are the one seer of all and really ever free. Verily, this alone is your bondage, that you see the seer as other than such. One seer, that is, you are the only subject, the entire universe being the object. bondage. It consists in regarding the eternal subject, the witness of the universe, the self, as belonging to the objective world. Verse number 8. Ahem, ahem, karte te ahem, मान महाकृष्ण हि दंशित न अहम कर्तेति विश्वासा अमृतम पीत्वा सुखी भव. Do you who have been beaten by the great black serpent of the egoism, I am the doer, drink the nectar of the faith, I am not the doer, and be happy. Black serpent, because egoism causes spiritual death. Nectar, it revives and removes all pain. Even so, destruction of egoism revives spiritual consciousness and frees one from worldly misery. Verse 9. एको विशुद्ध बोधो है मिति निश्चय वहीना प्रज्वाल्य ज्ञान गहनम वीत शोक है सुखी भव. For a snake which has no other reality than the rope itself, the rope does not really become a snake. Even so, this universe has no real existence. It is the self, pure consciousness and supreme bliss in which this universe is imagined to exist through ignorance. Consciousness, which is the substratum of the universe, remains eternally pure and unaffected. We are that consciousness. Therefore, we must cease identifying ourselves with any of these superimposed phenomena and thus be happy. Stanza number 11. मुक्ताभिमानी मुक्तो हि बद्धो बद्धा अभिमान्ये अपि किवदन्ति हि सत्ययं व्यामतिः सा गतिर्भवेत्. One who considers oneself free is free indeed, and one who considers oneself bound remains bound. As one thinks, so one becomes, is a popular saying in this world, which is too true. This is a very significant utterance, pregnant with an invaluable instruction for self-realization. In reality, the self is ever free. It never enters into a state of bondage. It is our ignorance that we think ourselves bound, and this thought makes our bondage persist and continue. If, however, we earnestly think ourselves as the eternally free self, the binding thought will vanish and we shall realize that we were ever free. Verse number 12. आत्मा साक्षी विभु पूर्ण एको मुक्तश्चिक्रियः असंगो निष्प्रह शांतो भ्रमात् संसारवानिव. The self is witness, all pervading, perfect, one free intelligence, actionless, unattached, desireless, and quiet. Through illusion, it appears as if of the world. 1. Bereft of all differentiation from like or unlike objects and all attributes of the world, bound by the desires of the world and involved in the cycle of birth and rebirth, unlike what has been described of the self in these words. Stanza 13. Kutrastham bodham advaita atmanam pribhavya abhaso aham brahmam mukta bhavam bahye mathantaram. Meditate on the Atma as immovable intelligence and non-dual, having given up external and internal self-modifications and the illusion I am the reflected self, individual soul, external, etc. Identification of the self with the physical and mental conditions such as the body is mine, etc. External and I am happy, etc. Internal, reflected, etc. Finite consciousness, which, according to a school of Advaitins, is the reflection of the self in the mind. Verse number 14. देहाभिमान पाशेन चिरम बद्धो असि पुत्रक बोधो अहम ज्ञान खंडगेन तन्नी करते सुखी भव. My child, you have long been in the noose of body consciousness. Sever it with the sword of the knowledge. I am intelligence and be happy. Long, that is from the beginning of time. It may be noted that though ignorance is without a beginning, it ends with the dawn of knowledge. Verse number 15. Nisango niskiryo asi tvam sav prakasho niranjana amev hi te bandha samadhi mano tishtasi. You are unattached, actionless, self-effulgent, and without any blemish. This indeed is your bondage that you practice samadhi. Bondage, etc. The self is really ever free and without any action. Yet we betake ourselves to samadhi, expression of mind, and similar other practices. Such attempts presuppose the thought that we are bound, and so long as we continue to think ourselves bound, freedom is impossible. Ashtavakra wants us to give up this thought altogether. For as he has said previously, one who considers oneself free is free indeed as surely as one who looks upon oneself as bound remains bound. Verse number 16. Tavya व्याप्त idam vishvam tavyi protam yathartatah शुद्ध बुद्ध स्वरूप सत्वं मागमः अक्षुद्र चित्तताम्. You pervade this universe and this universe exists in you. You are really pure consciousness by nature. Do not be small-minded, pervade, etc. The self is the substance of the universe, exists, etc. The universe cannot exist without the self as its substratum. Small-minded, unless your true nature described in the verse 17, verse number 17. निरपेक्षो निर्विकारो निर्भरः शीतलाश्यः अगाध बुद्धिर अक्षुब्धो भव चिन्मात्रवासनः. You are unconditioned, immutable, formless, unimpassioned, of unfathomable intelligence and unperturbed desire for Chit alone, unimpassioned because the heat of passions cannot reach the self, unfathomable because Chit or intelligence is above the limitations of relative knowledge. Unperturbed, unaffected by any external or internal phenomena. Verse number 18. Sakaram nirtam viddhi nirakaram tu nischalam etatvopadeshen ne punarbhav sambhava. Know that which has form to be unreal and the formless to be permanent. Through this spiritual instruction, you will escape the possibility of rebirth, that etc. That is body, etc. Formless, that is the self. Escape, etc. The round of birth and rebirth that one goes through is solely due to one's identification of the eternal self with body, mind, etc. and is destroyed by the knowledge of the true nature of the self which has been described in the preceding verses. Stanza 19. यथैवादृशमध्यस्ते रूपेऽन्तः प्रीततस्तु सः तथैव अस्मिन् शरीरे अन्तः प्रीतः परमेश्वरः. Just as a mirror exists within and without the image reflected in it, even so the Supreme Lord exists inside and outside this body. The idea is the image in the mirror has no real existence. It is a mere appearance. Only the mirror exists. Even so, body, mind, etc. have no real existence. It is only by being superimposed on the self that they appear to exist. Just as the reflection cannot affect the mirror, so body, mind, etc. cannot affect the self. Verse number 20. Ekam sarvagatam vyam bahir ant yatha ghate nityam nirantaram brahm sarvabhut gane tatha. As the same all-pervading ether is inside and outside a jar, even so the eternal all-pervasive Brahma exists in all things. I complete this video covering chapter 1, total number of 20 verses. Next video I will start with chapter 2, verse number 1. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar, my dear friends. Thank you. Namaste.